Hello, good morning, gamers. Welcome to the new episode of Breakfast with Boom. I'm your temporary host, You Can't Beat Cake. And on today's new episode, we are discussing how Sony's closure of Bluepoint Studios could affect first party remake development in a big way. Thanks so much for tuning in. And now I turn the show over to Mr. BoomStick XL.
Well, hello, everybody. Happy Friday, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for allowing my nephew to continue to intern. Of course, he's here to learn about podcasting. He's taking a social media and podcasting class. And they actually have that in school. Could you imagine that, ladies and gentlemen? But listen, we have a big show here today. Obviously, yesterday, we had some really heartbreaking news that the studio known for being the master of the remaster, Bluepoint Studios, unfortunately has been closed by PlayStation Studios. We have a lot of people in the industry that have reacted to this. Today is one of those days, ladies and gentlemen, that we are going to be naming the names, but not to be toxic. I'm going to be reading some of the tweets, some of the community outcry, if you will, or we're going to break down what they're saying. We have a very big panel here. Silent Cipher has once again joined us. Korkenstein is back, as per the norm. The receipt keeper himself, Crispy Bomb, is here, and we should have Fuzzy Velvet here, momentarily, but. Let's start with the welcoming, and then we'll get into the big topic of the show. And again, if we have time, I want to continue to talk about Crimson Desert, ladies and gentlemen. I keep seeing video, and look, I have said that I'm like trying to not know about the game because I want to go in as blind as possible. And there's just so much information that I find myself unable to stop reading about it because, again, I got some thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. But Korkenstein, welcome back, brother. Great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's been kind of crazy 2 or 3 weeks. I had Valentine's Day plans. My car got hit, and I had to get that repaired. Yeah, birthday plans, and just I partied too hard the night before on Thursday, and was like, "Sorry, Boom, I am not in podcast shape right now." But it's been awesome. I'm so glad to be back again, and what a week to come back to.
Yeah, look, normally this time of the year, there really isn't a lot of news, and I have to say, the news cycle, Crispy Bomb, has been very dense, to be quite honest with you. And yesterday's story is a big surprise because when you start talking about remastering older games, Sony has quite a repertoire of IP and older games that a lot of us, including someone like me, would love to see remade or brought back in a big way. And now that studio is gone. But Crispy, thanks so much for joining us, brother. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, chat. What is up, gentlemen? And yeah, I don't know. I was like, I went from putting out a spicy one to all of a sudden getting death threats and other such things to,
Jesus.
yeah. Well, not necessarily a full-on death threat, but wanting me to perish. So that was interesting. And then all of a sudden, it's like karma came and said, enough. Why don't you shut your mouth? And I think, once again, Stans, Sony doesn't like you, okay? They don't like you at all. All right, they think every time you want to scream at the top of your lungs that you need to sit down and shut the F up. All right, and they've done it once again. Okay, because as an Xbox fan, I was like, why would you close this studio down? But we're gonna get into it.
Yeah, we again, it's a topic that does not have a time limit. We have a lot to say, and I have a lot of information that I have to dole out per speaker. So I can't. I don't want to spend 30 minutes just kind of reading everything because the community is in a bit of an uproar. Silent Cipher, and we're going to get into what they're saying. And these are prominent names that This isn't just Johnny Two-Tone on the corner that nobody that has 9 followers. No, this is These are prominent people in social media. But hey, Sound Cypher, welcome back, bro.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Sweet. Yeah, no, what a heck of a week on social media with everything going on right now. I gotta say, obviously, all jokes aside, it's not fun to ever see a company go out. Seems like a really bad time for Sony, especially given the situation. But as you mentioned, online, the news, the info, everything going on, pretty dense, just like those ponies out there. Am I right?
Yeah, well, there's something to be said about what this closure will ultimately mean to first party development, but I think that we're going to see more.
Well, Boom, you know what they say, or at least what one specific pony says. And I'm not afraid to name drop on this one, so I apologize.
Go by name the names. It's fine.
Well, a certain Colin. We'll put it that way. A certain Colin,
and there are a lot of Collins out there, but I know the Colin that you're talking about, sir.
Yeah. A specific Colin made a comment that I love, and it continues to resonate every time. Is less is more.
Yes,
is what he said.
Yes.
So
he only needs one game a year. This Colin.
Yep, one Horizon game, so he can go to sleep early at night, and it's great. But anyways,
they
great
did
to be with
say,
you
there is evidence that Horizon might actually have melatonin in it. I don't know.
It's part of. We know that Sony was working on all these new features, like smell-o-vision and stuff like that. So maybe they found a way to inject melatonin into you as you play it, via the controller or something.
Into your eyeballs.
Into your eyeballs.
I'm not going to be able to finish this. Okay, now we're getting messy. That's crazy. Okay. All right. So let's try and keep this on. Look, okay, so let's welcome in the best bald head in the business, Fuzzy Belvedere. What's going on, brother? Big news to get into, and I'm very interested to get everyone's take. But of course, we got to read what the community is saying. But how you feeling, brother? Good morning.
Oh, feeling great. Glad to be here with you guys. Yeah, it's been a long time coming for Bluepoint. I know it may seem a surprise to some, but after Concord failed catastrophically, I guess that's even a word. They're in the hole for at least $500 million or more, and they canceled a few other games. So resources, are tight. So, I guess you could expect more. We'll see how Marathon lands, but man, we got a lot to talk about. And there's going to be some upset ponies out there, and don't say that you haven't been warned, but it is what it is. But
look, I mean, look. So, gentlemen in chat, I want to get right into the big story, and that is, of course, Sony has announced the closure of Bluepoint Games. The gaming industry as a whole is stunned. We have a lot of people that responded on social media, and we'll be reading their responses live on the air. Of course, this is one of those situations where we have to name the name because obviously you want to know who's actually saying what we're going to be talking about. But before we actually get to the community's response and get everyone on the panel's opinion, I have the presser here in front of me. This comes the way of Herman Holst, who, of course, is the CEO of Studio Business Group for Sony and PlayStation. And this is what Herman Holst had to say in an email to employees of PlayStation. It says this: "Hello, everyone. I wanted to share an important update from the studio's business. As I mentioned in December's town hall, 2025 had some strong highlights within PlayStation Studios. Ghost of Yotai launched to critical and commercial success. Death Stranding 2 on the Beach further showcased our commitment to narrative excellence. And Helldivers 2 and MLB The Show continue to drive ongoing player engagement and revenue. At the same time, we're operating in an increasingly challenging industry environment." I'll try saying that 5 times quick. "Rising development costs, slowed industry growth, changing player behavior, and broader economic headwinds are making it harder to build games, for our company. To navigate this reality, we need to continue adapting and evolving. We've taken a close look at our business to ensure we're delivering today while still well positioned for the future. As a result, we will be closing Bluepoint Games in March. This decision was not made lightly. Bluepoint is an incredible, talented team, and their technical expertise has delivered exceptional experiences for PlayStation and its community. I want to thank everyone at Bluepoint for their creativity, craftsmanship, and commitment to quality. Where possible, we will work to find opportunities for some impacted employees within our global network studios. While I know this is hard news to hear, I'm confident in the direction we're headed. Creativity, innovation, and building unforgettable experiences for players remains at the heart of PlayStation Studios. We have a robust roadmap for FY26 with much to look forward to in the months ahead. Thank you for your hard work and continued support. Best, Herman Holst. Well, I mean, look, what do you expect the guy to say? It's as corporate as you can possibly get, ladies and gentlemen. And the truth of the matter is, if you didn't know, the last game that Bluepoint made and released was for the launch of the PlayStation 5 in 2020. And that was, of course, a Souls game, which was critically acclaimed. I think it has like a 94 Metacritic, if I'm not mistaken. But they haven't released anything since. And you know whose fault that is ultimately? That is PlayStation Studios. That is Herman Holst's. That is the former president, Jim Ryan. And do you know why they didn't release any games, ladies and gentlemen? Well, I have the skinny, and I'm going to drop it like it's hot right now. This remake, or again, let's call them like who they are, the masters of the remaster. That's what they're known for in the industry. Well, this team was tasked to and was put on to a God of War multiplayer game to forward the ideology of gas games for Sony and PlayStation. And guess what happened to that game? It was canceled, and they were just sitting on their hands. So, of course, the studio was closed. Now, look, I hope everyone that's affected finds work immediately. If this was a different time, I was logistically calling for, the minute I heard the news, Phil Spencer, pick up the phone, get the entire team, because you have a lot of IP that needs some remakes and some remasters. Maybe this is who you need to hire. I facetiously said, make a new studio, Greenpoint Games, just to kind of stick it to Sony. Is that going to happen? It's unlikely, but I am hoping that the game industry as a whole opens its doors to everyone that was affected, because they are really, really talented. But before I bring in Korkenstein, I have to break this up because there's a lot of information from a lot of people, and I don't want to bombard you. Okay, so I'm gonna start off with Noor. Now, Noor is a big time PlayStation dude, and I don't follow him per se. But he does, look, he is who he is, and he's a PlayStation guy, and that's okay. Sometimes it can be a little bit toxic, so he's not really my cup of tea. That's fine. But I'm reading what he said. Now, what happened after the announcement of this closure was probably really, really bad timing for Sony Interactive Entertainment and PlayStation. And that is, they did a PlayStation ad or a commercial for Marathon, like literally right after. With 2 weeks to go, Marathon, Bungie's futuristic PvPvE extraction first FPS, launches March 5th. Try the server slam at no cost on February 26th to March 2nd. So, I mean, immediately that's in terrible taste. Now, talking to Korkenstein, who's going to take the mic in a second, and I agree with him. This wasn't done on purpose, folks. No one's going to shoot themselves in the foot like this. I mean, maybe Xbox would. Sometimes they do stupid things, but and we're laughing. But sometimes they step on rakes, and you're like, man, I could have seen that coming. Why didn't you? I mean, I'm not a corporate person. You should have seen this. Well, I say the same thing to Sony right now. This is one of those things that I know not every team works together, but I mean, it's got to be known internally that you're going to close a studio. I think you kind of go radio silent for the day. I'm just saying. So Nora goes on to say, thank you, PlayStation. Now I have a legitimate reason to hate this game and wish for its early death. Wow. Okay. Well, there's that. And I have another tweet here, gentlemen and chat, from Detective Seeds. Now, Detective Seeds, a lot of people consider him to be an insider. He does supposedly have some connections. And, well, Detective Seeds goes on to say in a tweet that is pretty interesting. He says, unfortunately, if rumors are true, Bluepoint Games may not be the only PlayStation studios with a / and S that we get bad news on this year. We'll let others leak the specifics on it as if they want to. I'm not getting anyone fired after what happened at Rockstar. So, wow. I mean, that's a lot. But Cork, let's talk about Bluepoint Games. Let's talk about this announcement. And let's talk about what Detective Seeds said. Look, I don't think you have to be an insider to suggest that there are other studios that are closing that just haven't been announced yet. Jade Raymond, who's no longer with her founded studio, has been working on a game for many, many years that's gone MIA. And I think that could be another studio closure if it hasn't already been, closed, because we haven't heard anything. Let's get your thoughts, man.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, this is something that, I mean, we've been saying it for years. I've been saying it for years on this show. Like, Sony has to change. They have to do something. I mean, you even heard Herman Holtz's whole thing about changing market conditions and how gamers play. And it's like, if only there was a company that could figure out how to increase their MAUs, how to increase their return of investment by expanding to other platforms. I mean, I'm surprised no other company has done that yet. Oh, wait, Xbox has. Like, but you're so arrogant. This is the PS3 level arrogance again that we've been talking about for the last 2-3 years from Sony this gen, that they don't know what they're doing. They think they could just ride the coattails. And granted, there's multiple levels to this. Sean Layden, I believe, is at fault. He's the one that started this whole, we need massive AAA blockbuster games that cost $400 million to make. And then guess what? They ballooned their budgets like crazy. Their ROI were single-digit margins. Coming back into so they're not making as much as they should have to start funding the next big AAA major game. They're kind of just keeping even with a little bit here and there. And then Jim Ryan actually had the right idea. I know people are going to disagree with me on this. He actually had the right idea. We need a live service element to keep reoccurring revenue generating for us so we can keep funding these massive AAA blockbuster $300-400 million IPs. The only thing is his vision was incredibly wrong on it. He thought, okay, we have God of War. We'll just make God of War live service. It doesn't work like that. Oh, we have The Last of Us. We'll just make The Last of Us live service now. Doesn't work like that. You can't do stuff like that, especially when you have these massive single player IPs where people absolutely love that gameplay. You can't take single player gameplay and then massively change it for live service and expect those same people to come back in and actually play that game and be like, yes, this is what I love about God of War. This is what I love about The Last of Us. This is what I love about Spider-Man. It just doesn't work. I mean, that's why as much as I was disappointed to hear, and I thought it was a cool idea, I totally understand why Spider-Man was canceled. After probably 10 hours of swinging around and doing the same side missions over and over and over and over and over and over again, it gets tedious. It gets monotonous. It's the same thing just over. And can you imagine doing that for 70 hours? 80 hours in a live service game? How many times some people put 200, 300. Can you imagine doing that same gameplay just over and over for 300 hours in a live service game? It's not going to go well. And that's the problem. And Sony is in trouble when you have a low investment studio like Bluepoint, which does remasters, and you have to shutter them to save money. They're low investment. All they do is remasters and remakes. Those are low investment, high ROI, potentially. Yes. I should say potentially high ROI. For those that don't know, that means return of investment. So the money that you're putting in, you should get double, triple that because you're spending little to make a lot. And that's what remakes are. That's their whole purpose or point. Because the story's already developed. 99% of the time, the audio just needs to be cleaned up. So you keep the same audio. You don't have to worry about character design. You don't have to worry about all the pre-production stuff. It's already done. You don't even have to worry about some of the production stuff because that gameplay element is already finalized and figured out unless you're going to revamp it. There's a little bit, but majority of the game is already done for you. You're just giving it a new, fresh paint kind of thing, which, I don't think there were which I give the Resident Evil series. I really like what they did with that. That's a proper remake that actually took a lot of time to actually take its time with it, but they also made a high ROI off of it. I just don't understand what this whole what they're doing here. I understand why they're doing it. It's because, like I said, they don't have the live service generating revenue coming in. You can't sit here and fund studios if you're hemorrhaging money. We just saw their last financial quarters and everybody wanted to focus on, look at 90 million consoles. Oh my God. And then you look at it, it's like, yeah, but their hardware sales are down 23% and their operating profit doesn't look too good. Their profit margin as well is still single digit. So what does that really mean for a company when you look at Microsoft, who's, guess what? Their hardware's down, but their MAUs are up. Their operating profit and revenue is up. Their profit margin is in double digits. What's the better scenario? But everyone wants to focus on hardware sales. Look at hardware sales couldn't save a low investment studio with less than 100 people. What does hardware? It's almost like we've been saying this over and no one wants to listen. Listen. Hardware sales and exclusives aren't the revenue drivers you think they are. They don't save studios because you're limiting your consumer base. Just because you sell one console doesn't mean people are going to stay on that console and spend in that ecosystem. Especially when you're especially when you have a closed ecosystem like PlayStation does. Granted, they've moved out to PC. They've expanded to that. But those games that they're releasing on PC are still pretty much single player experiences that don't have really any live service element to it. And you're still missing a lot of the big chunk of sales on day one because you refuse to go PC day and date. So you're not even making the amount of revenue that you should be making on release day. It boggles my mind. And especially with recently, you could see there's no way PlayStation is looking at Xbox right now and seeing, oh my God, we are paying them 70% from our pockets to their pockets because they're selling on our ecosystem. How do we get in on that? How do we get the 70%? There's absolutely no way they're not discussing this. It's just a shame. Bluepoint's a good studio, and you could have put them on numerous amounts of anything. Help them be a support studio for the new God of War remakes. What other? Who knows? Maybe The Last of Us, redone again for the third, fourth time. Just something, whatever you guys are doing that you've always done for remakes. Bring back the old Ratchet and Clanks. Take some plate, some stuff off of Insomniac's plate. to help them remaster some of their older games, whatever it is. I mean, Bloodborne right there. Like they already have the experience with Demon Souls. Like you could have put them on that project. Just something. And I don't understand. What are you doing? And like I said, I don't really blame Herman as much as this. Like I said, Jim Ryan left them on a sinking ship. He basically saw this iceberg on Titanic and was like, well, my time's done here. I think I'm going to dip out, and basically let Herman Holst run into the iceberg. Now Herman's trying to salvage what he can. And I think some of it is a little like, I think because more than likely the Horizon co-op game is probably, the Horizon co-op game was probably already greenlit under Jim Ryan. That's probably one of the 12. Yeah. So I don't think, but I mean, still Herman loves Horizon. That's his baby, and it's everywhere. It's one of PlayStation's also best-selling IPs. So it makes sense why they're double, why they're putting 10 toes down for Horizon on everything that they do. But I don't really blame Herman. I saw a lot of people saying Herman should be fired for this. This was a sinking ship. He's just trying. He has a little, with those sandbox lunch, pails. He's just sitting on the Titanic trying to throw water back out into the water right now. He has no real way of trying to stop the bleeding of this, other than multi-platform. That's literally their only option right now to stop shuttering studios, to stop, to stop canceling projects. It doesn't even have to be new stuff. You don't even have to go day and date. Just, Wolverine to PC day one right there. That would be a huge moneymaker. That's if Wolverine's still on track for 2026. Even still bringing The Last of Us Part 1 to Xbox right there. Done. God of War, the original. You don't have to do even God of War. The Last of Us, Ratchet and Clanks. Xbox loves platformers. That's a massive big thing for them. That at least just something, but it's just the level of arrogance and the antiquated thinking of these PlayStation execs that just, I don't understand what they're doing. They rather lose money than sacrifice their pride just a little bit. And let's the next part, Marathon's supposed to be this big live service generating revenue service for them. That's supposed to be their live service this year. You got to think, besides Gran Turismo, what else do they have that's going to be live service revenue generating?
It would be MLB The Show, and of course still Helldivers, but whether or not people stay on those games is, we don't know. But if they're, again, he
those
made
really
mention
haven't
of
been
it.
Yeah, and plus those are also now multi-platform. So now they're giving a portion of their profits to Xbox, to PS, to Steam, wherever those things are being sold at. And predominantly Helldivers is majority Steam. So those people are Sony's not making 100% of that profit back. So they really, Marathon would be the big one for them to be able to sell on their console to get that 100% revenue or that 70% revenue from all the other revenue sources. So if this fails, what does that mean? Where do they go after this? Because this is, I don't, and to be fair, I don't think it's going to fail. From what I played 6 months ago, I wasn't a fan, but from what I'm hearing from other people, it's turned around a lot. So I'm having hope that Bungie can bring it together. I love Bungie. I love Destiny, but I don't know. I don't know if they can pull it off. And I think it will land decently. It's just, it won't have any legs. I'll put it like that. I think it'll land decently. It just won't have legs for longevity to do what PlayStation needs it to do, to be that reoccurring revenue giant that they desperately need right now. So if Marathon fails flat, what would you do as a CEO? You got to ask that. You're hemorrhaging money. So obviously you either have to cancel projects or close studios or multi-platform.
Probably multi-platform would be the way to go. But again, the games community doesn't want to hear that. They swear that that's an Xbox problem only. And that's not the truth. Nope. Great points all around, Cork. Really, I mean, there's no arguing what you said about the multi-platform angle. because it's something that they're gonna look. They've already put games on Xbox with Helldivers, and it did very well for them. Now, did it sell as well as it did on PlayStation? No, PlayStation had about a year ahead, and it sold a lot of copies, both on PC and on PlayStation, for that matter. I'm very surprised that it's taken this long to continue, but I think something like this, the closure of Bluepoint Studios, is maybe going to fast track that. But you know what? Before we bring Crispy Bomb in, I do want to catch up on some super chats, and then of course I want to read a story that I have here from Pure Xbox about David Jaffe, who once again went off on this closure. But we have Scott Woodford in the chat, who's been a channel member for 19 months. Scott goes on to say this: Sony made a mistake, and I don't think there will be a PS6, but a handheld hybrid. Happy Friday, everyone. Well, Scott, first of all, thanks so much for being a member for that long. We do greatly appreciate the generosity. And yeah, there's probably going to be a PlayStation 6. Maybe could it be a like handheld dockable? I mean, that would be kind of cool. But I think your standard PlayStation 6 is going to happen. I just don't know what that's going to look like. And we do have a report that they're looking to push that out to as far as 2029 or even 2030 due to the rising costs of RAM and memory. And of course, Lynn Tao, who of course is the CFO for PlayStation, she literally just said in an update to investors that they are going to try and keep costs of the consoles down by using their player base to gain extra money. What was talked about specifically was price increases on DLC, and even the words of price increases to games were made mention of. That's really not good. And I would not be surprised if Sony tried to move their games to $80. And if they did, that is going to really, I mean, listen, folks, I really think that the industry is teetering. I don't know what particular situation is going to make it fall over, but these rising costs pushed onto consumers are going to have people buying less games, and that's already happening, which is why I love Xbox Game Pass. But I hope that answers the question, brother. Teddy_P drops a very generous $2 super chat. So Teddy, great to see you here, brother. Thank you for the generosity. He says PlayStation mismanagement, right? Ponies are down bad. Yeah, I mean, look, they haven't had a lot of really wins lately, and this is a definite L. This is definitely an L. Dan Lazaro drops a very generous $2 super chat. This is a great point. Bethesda needs Bluepoint. They absolutely that would be a studio that knows how to remake, remaster, repurpose older games, but they're talented enough to be on their own. Give them a game to work on and let them go. I like the idea of, Xbox has so many IPs that we're all waiting for. I'd love to see, again, I know they're not going to do Banjo-Kazooie, but they could, right? They could do a remake of the original. There's so many others that they can get to. There's a lot of IP that Xbox has that, like PlayStation, is just dormant. But ultimately, this is a really, really bad move, at least in my opinion. But thanks, Dan, for the generosity. We also have here Black Helmet Man, 1977, folks. He has been a channel member for 53 months, bro. That is crazy generosity. Of course, Mrs. Boom and I do greatly appreciate that. He says Sony is remaking God of War trilogy. Let's close the remake studio. Makes sense to me. I mean, you're not wrong, dude. I mean, just saying that out loud made me laugh because it's just stupid. It just really is. But supposedly, Sony Santa Monica is actually doing the trilogy remake. We'll see. I know a lot of people, like right now, after what they released as a shadow drop in the 2.5D game. I mean, look, they don't really make mistakes, and it's the God of War trilogy. They're not trying to reinvent the wheel. I know that there was a report yesterday that funny you mentioned that that there's going to be new weapons. There's going to be a lot of newness is happening. That gets me excited. I that's a day one purchase for me. I don't care what it costs. I know you shouldn't say that, but yeah, give me the God of War trilogy for $70. You can have my money. And if there's a deluxe edition or even a collector's edition, Sony will get my money. That's not even a question. I love the original trilogy, and to have Sony Santa Monica working on it, I have faith, even after what they just released. And it really wasn't them. Well, it was them. They were supervising, but it was a small team, and it didn't come out that good, to be honest with you. But Nino Vestic, our generous friend from Hawaii, gifts one Double Barrel Gaming membership. Folks, I think he's done that every day this week. That is crazy kind of you, brother. Thank you so much for the insane generosity. Aloha to you and the family. We have Cross Faith Army dropping a very generous $10 super chat. He goes on to say, Fuzzy, glad you made it. I was worried about you laughing. People are switching to PC gaming for a reason. Never owned a console except Switch, Xbox, and Sony. Should be ashamed of themselves over the years. I mean, look, Xbox is doing some different things. And I do want to, again, I have to repeat it because I thought it was such a great comment from Paris Lilly. And I believe it was on Gamer Tag Radio where he literally said, you know, Sony, Xbox, and Nintendo are all doing different things, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I have to agree with him. I think what Xbox is doing is changing the game. They are literally doing what they've done for years. They're innovating. They're going to make the industry change with them. I don't know if Sony's retreat to 2029 or 2030 is because they feel that they can't just release another PlayStation. That's just another PlayStation. I don't know if that works anymore, folks. It's going to be a powerful box, but if it can't do what Xbox does and it's only playing PlayStation 4, 5, and 6 games, where's the innovation? What people want new, and they're not going to get it with it outside of the console itself. But thanks so much for the generosity, brother. Crispy, I got to bring you in, brother. But before we do, we're going to pull up a story here. This was, of course, from purexbox.com. Again, Fraser Gilbert, who's been on an absolute tear with his writing, goes on to say this in his article. God of War creator suggests Xbox should get involved in Bluepoint Games situation. And I'm going to read you the tweet coming from who else? David Jaffe, who has been himself on a tear. And he really has been very vocal. And again, we talked about him on Wednesday evening on some of the things he said about the God of War game. But we're here to talk about what he had to say about Bluepoint's closure. He says this, chat and panel. Ring, ring. Bluepoint Games picking up the phone. Yes, hello. And he goes on to say, hey, this is Xbox P3. Hey, man, it's Phil Spencer. Form a new team and we'll fund the game for y'all. Original or a remake of one of our IPs. And he goes on to say, and of course, that he's just being silly or facetious. This is where he gets for real. TLDR, this isn't hard. Do not let this amazing team splinter. Well, look, I don't, again, the world is the world. Maybe 5 years ago, you do see a Phil Spencer make a call. I said it facetiously about calling the team Greenpoint and hiring everybody. And I think that they're a talented team that could help a publisher like Xbox, like Bethesda, easily. They could be integrated in to work on something. Now, the one thing about Xbox, owning Bethesda, Xbox owning Activision, and Xbox, well, being a platform itself for Xbox, they have a lot of IP. And there's a lot of IP that a lot of us would like to play again in a new way. And they're the masters of the remaster. So why wouldn't a call go out? But one other one I want to read for before I bring Crispy in. And this is from Snowbike Mike from Kinda Funny Games. Mike goes on to say, Dear PlayStation, maybe stick to the advice of TLC taught us. Don't go chasing waterfalls. Please stick to the rivers and lakes that you're used to. Ouch. Well, Crispy Bomb, let's bring you in. Okay, so we got a lot to cover here. Bluepoint Games closed. It appears, thanks to Detective Seeds and some of our deducting in the green room, that it's not going to be the only studio that's going to be closing for them this year. It's likely that an announcement of Jade Raymond, former head of studio, Jade Raymond, her studio, Haven, will be closed at some point. Their game, Fair Games, that looked like a ripoff of, well, a lot of other games, didn't get a good reception. That game has been MIA. We have not heard anything about it. So that's definitely a possibility. Bend Studios, who, of course, really, really wanted to make a sequel to their amazing zombie game, have really not released anything. And I know they're working on something. I just don't know what it is. Sony finds themselves in a pickle. And I do think that some of the stuff that Cork said about trying to now move to make money, they may actually have to go the third-party route quicker than some of their players would have liked. And I got to be honest with you. There was a tweet last week that maybe it was this week from Insomniac Games answering a fan pretty coldly about Spider-Man potentially being ported to Xbox. And they said, well, that's not happening. Now, look, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know if it's the same person, but that same person said the same thing about Spider-Man going to PC, and, well, look what happened. I'm not saying that that's around the corner, even though I believe it is. At some point, Marvel's going to be like, listen, what are you doing with the IP? You're not making money, and they're still paying 35% on everything that they do with Marvel. So do I think Wolverine is day and date? No. Would it make them a lot of money if it was? Yes. But let's talk about Bluepoint Games, Crispy Bomb.
Man, yeah, it's a lot to think about, because if you really look at the IPs they keep throwing out there as their new live service model, and then to suggest that some of these IPs, like even like that Twisted Metal project, like that makes total sense. Like why would you like just be like, no, we're good? And then, you know, you bring out this Horizon game and it's like, you know, mixed reception, kind of like, And it's like, okay, like, do you understand that you're oversaturating the market with Horizon style games, you know, games that are involved in that universe? Do you understand that? And I feel like, you know, Sony doesn't know how to monetize certain things. They just want this same model. And when it doesn't do well, they start looking at other models and saying, okay, well, we can't continue this because it's not going to work. And you look at a studio, and this is where I just don't understand it. Like a studio like Bluepoint, you have so many dormant IPs that you haven't touched in like 10 plus years that even logically you could say, okay, these games could be remade and then ported also to Xbox and even maybe the Switch if it's comparable to PC as well. And you could literally fund their entire existence based off of just that. And you can look at a simple example of Gears of War Reloaded. Talk mad smack about it, but guess what? It sold over 600,000 copies on PlayStation. And that's what we know of a few months ago. So it's there. People will play games that they haven't, you know, like there's plenty of Xbox people maybe haven't played one of their games, or there is an opportunity. And that's where I say, I think these devs are going to find somewhere. And I really do hope, you know, Phil does, you know, quote unquote, pick up the phone and say, well, we're trying to port to PlayStation. Wouldn't it be a great studio, or at least a bunch of people to pick up and help us in doing that? And I think it would be a logical decision. Now, the way I look at it is how far are they willing to go with closing these studios? Because a lot of these studios they've picked up within the last 5 years and then also closed them years later. And you always look at what IPs they're working on. And it's like, okay, have you thought of maybe porting them to other gaming landscapes? Being older games does not mean you're taking away from your community. It's saying, hey, it's coming here. do we not want games that, maybe we grew up with? Maybe we want a new shiny coat of paint, something to play that, gives us a little nostalgia. We might buy that, at a reasonable price. And these are all things that they are fighting with. And that's where you go back to return on investment. As Cork said, they're not seeing it. You could sell 90 million consoles, but if you're making $1 off every console, if that, you're not making that much money. And then on top of it, for them to go and say, oh, we're getting rid of our TV business, basically. Okay, TCL, you take that over. If you look at Sony right now, they don't know what they are doing. And we have been trying to tell you this for a while. Does Xbox seem like they're all over the place? Yeah, but guess what? They are all over the place. They say you could buy this here, play on our subscription. You can do this. You could get this Ultimate Edition and, you'll get the next 2 DLCs. Like, they are trying to monetize at all different levels in any way, shape, or form. And I think Sony right now is in this conundrum of do we stay mostly only on PlayStation and PC, or do we open the door? And until they figure that out, you're going to either see closures or you're going to see failed projects that they release, like a Concord, like a possibly Marathon. What's going on with Fair Games? These are all things that are legitimate questions that we have pointed out for years now. And nobody seems to want to say anything until something like this happens. And I say, guess what? This is a reality, okay? This is the market conditions don't just affect one company. They affect all of them. And now you're seeing what is happening. It's just really illogical for them to do it with this specific studio because of their pedigree and the amount of just pure joy that they've given over these past few, I'd say a decade. So maybe they should have just not joined PlayStation. They probably should have just been left alone. I mean, you probably would have still been exclusive stuff for them. I don't understand it. And I have to give a thumbs up to some of the people that are calling it out for once. Yeah. I appreciate that.
Well, I mean, listen, you're not wrong in any points whatsoever. I do see different movement happening for Sony. They have to figure out a way to stop the bleeding. I know that, and I'm actually surprised you didn't make mention of it, Crispy, because we talk about it all the time. The automatic fallback for any PlayStation fan when there's controversy is 90 million consoles. Well, Cork said it. 90 million consoles are only going to get you so much revenue. Again, they literally just had a PowerPoint with the CFO of PlayStation explaining to investors that, hey, listen, in order to combat the RAM prices and the memory prices, and we're trying to keep the console where it is without having to raise it, we're going to now use our player base to make up the difference. They literally said that. So what does that mean? Well, if there's anything that you know about Sony, they are the masters of nickel and diming you. So maybe that remaster that was normally 10 will be, that upgrade from, an old graphics on PS4 to PS5 will go from 10 to 15. Maybe they raised the price of PlayStation Plus. I just paid 160 plus tax, and I didn't know I was going to because I had an automatic renewal, and I did not know that. So they got my money. What if it goes up to 180? What if it goes up to 200? And again, I kind of circle back and say, well, if it did go that high, something like God of War Sons of Sparta should have been in the service, or at least the top tier service, and it still wasn't, and I'm pretty pissed on that. But you know what? I do want to bring in Silent Cypher. And Silent, I got a couple more folks of the community that I want to read. Now, Jake Randall, if you don't know who he is, pretty popular dude. And just for context, he's followed by 340,000 humans. So Jake Randall's a YouTuber, good dude. I've had a conversation with him or two on the socials. He was pretty big, helping people get their Nintendo Switch too. He's a Nintendo guy. Well, this is what Jake Randall had to say. And like I said, he's not a controversy kind of a dude. He's a pretty positive gamer. He's a pretty positive community member. People really like this dude. He goes on to say this. Today, PlayStation showed the gaming world, including all independent studios, that you, in all caps, should never agree to be acquired by Sony. Sony didn't just fumble the bag today, but for their future as well, as no self-respecting studio would ever consider joining the PlayStation team now. And he goes on to say, he has context here, and this is a breaking news drop by Jason Schreier. And Jason Schreier says, breaking, PlayStation is shutting down Bluepoint Games, the studio responsible for modern remakes of classic games such as Demon Souls and Shadow of the Colossus, Bloomberg News has learned. And he goes on to say, a shocking end for a well-respected studio. I mean, I don't know what else to say, but I'm interested to get your hot takes on this. What are your thoughts there, Silent Cypher?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I threw some shade at it and brought light to it at the beginning of the show, but it always sucks when this type of stuff happens in the industry. I don't wish anyone to lose a job, but it does feel like they were kind of set up to fail in regards to the fact that, these are sins of the past coming back to haunt them now. It's like you guys highlighted is, these were things that Jim Ryan had put into play. We saw, this cadence and this move that they were going to suddenly do like 12 games as a service, which the thing is like, if we know anything about games as a service, for every 10 or 12 of them that you actually put out, only 1 or 2 of them are even going to survive. And it's likely that even only one of them is actually going to last for more than a few years. Mm-hmm. So it was an interesting move back then. And I was kind of disappointed that was what their approach was anyways. This is the big, bold move we're going to do. And it was literally, you look back at what all of the Sony fans and even folks who just enjoyed playing a Sony game occasionally had told Sony over the years. We want single player experiences, narrative experiences. And then they're like, hey, you know what you really want, though, is games as a service. And we were like, no, that's actually not what we wanted. Like certain games it works with. And this goes back to, I think, what Korkenstein was mentioning is like, not every game is designed for an MMO style or a games as a service live style. But you look at something like Twisted Metal. Twisted Metal seemed like it was a perfect fit for that type of thing. We've seen it in the past. They talked about it in the past. I mean, hell, I played it on my PS2 back when you had to connect the network adapter to the back of your fat PS2.
Wow, that's taking it back, dude.
Yeah, so like I played it on there way back in the day, and it was fun. Now, granted, it was janky because our tech was not super great at that point in time, but it was still fun. And so when they brought that up and they said, hey, this is what we're doing with this franchise, made sense. Made perfect sense to me. But then a lot of the other ones that they suddenly were like, hey, you're gonna get a games as a service or an MMO, a large experience in this. I was like, yeah, that's not really what we wanted. And we know based on the numbers, we know on concurrent users and everything that Sony traditionally, most of the people that are in that ecosystem are not the big multiplayer people. We've seen it time and time again. If there's a game that they get like pulled into, we saw it with Helldivers for sure. But even then, the concurrent users don't match up to something like Steam. But you look at Call of Duty. Call of Duty has always been a big one for them. Madden's always a big one for them. It's the casual box. And so it's not a surprise that this move kind of came to fail and literally just tripped them up in the process. We see Microsoft step on rakes all the time. Sony stepped on a really big rake. And unfortunately, a lot of people got impacted because of their bad business decisions. I wouldn't say that Herman is, sole to blame. I can't throw that all on him because, like I said, it's sins of the past come to haunt them now. So, do I think he had a part in it? Yes. Do I think he probably wasn't do I think he probably didn't have the stones to stand up to his corporate support and be like, "Hey, this is what we need to do. We can't keep going this path because we're going to be screwed if we do." I don't think he probably stood up to them or really made a big stance on it. It felt like he kind of fell in and was like, "Okay, this is what we're doing," which the yes man approach only gets you so far. But with how many things we've seen get shut down in the process, obviously at some point in time, they needed to pivot and they didn't. Again, it goes back to the arrogance of what the company is. And this is something that we see, it's also, you got to look at where this company comes from. And Japan is a place where a lot of people are very, they're very prideful. Like they're going to take care of their stuff. The business out there is different than what you see in the US. Like they've always been very close to chest. They've been very tight-lipped about what they say. They're very prideful and proud of what they do and what they deliver, right? And that's cool, except for we've seen a lot of cracks in the armor on that over the last little bit. We saw all these things get canned. We saw massive change up in the actual layout of management in Sony. We saw multiple closures. And then we started seeing other things where it became obvious. I've said it before, but like the Sony that we have now is not the Sony that we grew up on. It just isn't. You look at it and it's a shell of what it used to be. Where are my siphon filters? Where's my kill zone? Where's my resistance? Where's my twisted metal? Where are these things? And it's simply that they got too cocky with what they had. And they go back to that PS3 arrogance of, oh, well, we're going to charge you like $700 for a console, and oh, you can't afford it? Well, just go get another job. That's kind of where we're back to. But the thing is we've seen some of the cracks in the armor. Like you guys mentioned, them shuttering off their TV business and giving TCL, I think, like 49% of control on that side of things. They're shuttering things off because the current system situation is not working out for them, and so they're having to they're trying to diversify their portfolio so they can make money somewhere. Just like you guys mentioned with the hardware, hardware sales is great, and every time that I have some pony come in there and be like, oh yeah, 90 million consoles, blah blah blah, well, that's great, but when I worked in the game store, they always highlighted this, and it's very, very simple to understand. When you go to GameStop, when you go to these game stores and you buy a system, what are they trying to push to you? They're trying to push controllers, games, their membership, all that stuff. Why are they selling you those other things? Because those are where you make the profit. That's where the revenue is. The hardware has never been the thing that you make the money off of. It's literally the handshake at the door, and then everything else is the actual profit. That's why you always see them focusing so hard. That's why if you go to GameStop, I don't know if they do it now, but back when you used to go on their website and you would look at like a Nintendo Switch, it'd be like, here's your Nintendo Switch. And even though the system was only like $350, it'd be like, oh, it's $650. And you're like, why is it $300 more? And it's because they were attaching like 3 games, a controller, their MVP membership, whatever it was. It's clear that the software has always been a main factor, that online service has been a main factor as far as getting more revenue back. And the problem that Sony runs into right now is they don't have enough actual output of games and stuff like that for people to buy, for them to see a lot of money come back. So as they're not diversifying, as they're canceling stuff instead of actually making profit on these games, we're going to continue seeing closures. It's like you guys were saying, Haven is probably on the chopping block as well. I don't know that for sure, but given how quiet it's been and given how tepid a response we saw with Fair Games, I wouldn't be surprised, and that sucks. Hopefully, if this ends up happening, hopefully the same thing occurs as we've seen with other layoffs. is, hopefully these people have a good support system to get their stuff, like to get themselves off to other development studios. When these places close down, you see a lot of people reach out and try and help find jobs for people throughout the industry, just to try and lend like a helping hand. And so I'm hopeful that we see that with these, and I'm hopeful that if it happens to Haven, same type of thing occurs. But it's not a good look for him. I wish everyone that worked at Bluepoint all the best, and I hope they land safely. But Sony had this coming, and you really can't say that it's a shock that they've gotten to this point, and it's going to get worse, I think.
Yeah, unfortunately, I do think it is going to get worse. There are several studios that they've acquired that have not put out a game in years, and at some point, they have to put out a game. Some of those teams were on games. Bluepoint was on a God of War multiplayer game or a gas game that was canceled, and you almost saw the writing on the wall. But look, I got to bring Fuzzy Belvedere in, and I want to just get his hot take on it. But I got some information that kind of really sets the tone for where Sony is right now. So this is the next person's tweet that I want to read comes the way of Notice PlayStation, Noti at Noti Play. And just again, context, folks, they're followed by nearly 113,000 people. That's a lot of people. So they're known within the community. Well, here's what they had to say, and it's a bit of a mouthful, folks. So get ready. It says, "Watch out." According to what Shinobi602 said on Reset Era, the main reason for Bluepoint's closure would be that the studio hasn't released a game since 2020. The problem arises because for 2 or 3 years, Sony reportedly tasked Bluepoint with developing a God of War live service game, a project that was later canceled by Sony themselves. In other words, they would have shuttered. They would be shutting down the studio because of the decision that they made themselves. They're textbook incompetent. Talking about PlayStation, right? So here, and again, here's another, rounded out conversation from the his El Gamer Informando. It is at All Console Fan. He's a gentleman from Spain. He goes on to say this, folks. Check this out. Again, this is just context before we bring Fuzzy in and get you an idea of what's going on at Sony, right? Because, of course, there's going to be, there are people, there are trolls in the chat right now that are trying to somehow sugarcoat this. There's nothing you can sugarcoat. If it's a piece of shit, it's a piece of shit. That's sorry, folks. That's just what it is. And that's exactly what we're dealing with right now. Sony is a real shitty company, and you got to stop, capping for these dudes because they don't care about you. It's blatantly obvious. So all console fan says Sony's studio acquisitions during the PlayStation 5 era and their decisions have been an absolute disaster. 7 studios acquired since 2020. 4 of them have already shut down. And here's where we get into the nitty-gritty. Acquired Bluepoint hasn't allowed them to produce a single game since the acquisition in 2021. Acquired Haven Studios in 2022 and still haven't provided any meaningful updates for Fair Games. Acquired Firewalk Studios in 2023 and ended up with Concord, also known as the biggest disaster in video game history, and shut down the studio in 2024. Acquired Bungie for $3.6 billion in 2023, and Jim Ryan called this acquisition better than Activision, if you remember, which only led to layoffs and delays on Marathon due to plagiarism issues and a disappointing first reveal. Shut down London studios in 2024 and canceled their still unannounced live service game. They also closed Neon Koi. And on top of that, he goes on to say, folks, The Last of Us Online, DOA. Spider-Man multiplayer, DOA. Ben Studios live service game, canceled. Bluepoint's God of War live service game, canceled. Jim Ryan had 12 live service games planned to launch in 2026. Only Helldivers came out and actually succeeded. The rest were either canceled before release or shut down shortly after, like Concord. He goes on to say they ruined an entire generation of the hard work of thousands of talented people for nothing, and only the talented studios ended up paying the price for the clueless executives and their ridiculousness. There's no cap or limit to this. And in all caps, folks, again, this is for context. Sony ruined this generation, and no amount of console units sold or financial reports you flash to pretend everything is fine is going to change that. And in closing, they go on to say this: if you actually care, you would acknowledge this, because making profits does not automatically equal ethics, morality, or respect for the art of and its audience. Now, this is a PlayStation dude, ladies and gentlemen. He has a PlayStation-centric, thought and theory. That's saying a lot. So, Fuzzy, let's bring you in and get your hot takes on this, man.
Whew, okay, where to begin? All right, so let's go back to the business update for Xbox. And I know people are like, what the heck are you talking about? Why bring up Xbox? There was something key that Phil said as far as when it came to the new business model. You could either monetize your existing customer base, or you can find another customer base. They went with the latter, with the 4 games that eventually became more games. But the key thing, there was a story like a little bit earlier this week where people were upset about how Sony is going to be monetizing the PS5 for an extended period of time because the PS6 has been pushed back. And that's part of them monetizing their existing customer base. Xbox's approach was find an additional customer base, whether it be PC, Switch, PlayStation, tablet, phone, TV, whatever. That's how they went about it to get those other revenue streams. All of that to be said, I know there's a lot of, ponies in the chat that are trying to, mix up stuff. And it's like, for those that don't know, I was one of those that was upset about, what was it? Not High on Life. Hi-Fi Rush going over to PlayStation. That kind of didn't make sense. It was their first newest IP in a while, but it is what it is. All of that being said, I was upset and called Xbox stupid for closing Tango Gameworks. I know other people had other theories. I knew some of the issues with people leaving, but no one left no more people left than when the one lady left that started her own studio. Everybody was focused on the guy that started Tango and the handful of people that went. There were a lot more that left with the other lady, and that was before Hi-Fi Rush came out. So do more research, people, when you want to talk about Tango. That aside, I also called out as far as the, Project Blackbird being canceled. That to me was foolish after, unfortunately, seeing it, and now you can't unsee it, knowing that that was a lot of potential that they pretty much squandered. Sure, it was about another year away, and it's already been in development for 6 years, but I think that one would have been worth the release, considering how many people have cried out for something closer to an original Mass Effect trilogy. That had a lot of elements of that and Starfield and a lot of other things that people love in games that are live service or MMO-like type games. So all of that aside, let's get to PlayStation and their absolute F-ups. All right, so does everybody remember a game called The Day Before? That game that everybody wishlisted on Steam and then was, found out that it was a fake game. But there was a lot there that they showed in that trailer that people loved. It was like a mixture of The Division meets The Last of Us. What idiot over at PlayStation thought it would be a good idea to cancel Factions? Because you had that same game and you had the IP behind it. Sure, Naughty Dog didn't have the means to, support a live studio or a live service game and a, single player game that they are known for. But that's how you grow the studio. Or you take one of your internal studios, maybe Bluepoint, or you look inside of what you already have, whether it be some people over at Bungie or what have you, and put them on starting a support team to support the live service of Factions. I think Factions, even in its whatever phase it was when they abandoned it, I think you could release it and still have a game that you could build with the community, taking the community feedback that would give them that bigger hit that's first party, as opposed to relying on Helldivers, where they kind of squandered some of that growth by the mandate of linking it to the PSN. I think that killed some of the momentum. Sure, a lot of people on Xbox picked it up. There's still a lot of people playing it on PC, but it's not one that resonates within the PlayStation nation of those 90 PS5s that are out there, or 90 million plus PS5s that are out there. So all of that being said, I think something like Factions would have been that one that resonated more with their core fan base that have PS5s in their household. So that was a missed opportunity. And as you know, a few others have mentioned, the whole Spiderweb thing would have been another game that that they canceled that would have done well. Sure, they would have had to share some of the money with Marvel as far as the licensing and so forth, but look how well Marvel Rivals is doing. And it seems like everybody is making money that's involved. So something along those lines shouldn't be too difficult to continuously update, whether it be skins or you know, different backpacks or cats for your apartment, or you know, other cosmetic crap that they could sell you. They would have a easy time convincing or coaxing people out of $20 here or there for that type of stuff, just like Fortnite does. So that's a missed opportunity on that side. But they're going to at least kind of make up for it with Marvel, with the Token, the fighter game, which there's some more bad news for Sony fans in reference to Sony investing money in stuff and then selling off things. It seems like fire sale type of doings. They're no longer part of Evo, or no longer own Evo, which I just kind of found that out today. So much for having this game that you invested millions of dollars in and have it as what could have been a highlight in the Evo fighting genre and contests and so forth. And then you abandon Evo. I don't know.
I didn't even know that.
Like, it feels like the corporate people are making the decisions because they're looking at the dollars, which, you know, ultimately as a business, it's all about dollars. It's all about profit and margins and so forth. And, you know, everybody was pointing to the sales of consoles, which, yes, it's sure that, you know, you sell a console, you're more likely to sell software. But if your attachment rate is no better than your next competitor, where let's just look at Arc Raiders for a moment, shall we? Numbers came out not too long ago where you have 90 million PS5s, and now that we know, about 50 million or so, or maybe a little less, you know, Xbox Series consoles out there. But yet there's only 1% difference in the number of sales between those two platforms. So is it that Xbox players buy more games, or is that more of an Xbox type game? It's a shooter, a third-person shooter at that, but it's something that, you know, kind of gravitates to that customer base more so than, let's say, PlayStation, because the shooters that gravitate for them are your Call of Duty, which Xbox owns now, or things like, you know, well, Marvel Rivals also does well there. NBA 2K also does well there, but they really don't have that revenue stream of their live service game that they could have, you know, reached out at. And I know a lot of people had mentioned earlier about Twisted Metal. That's like the no-brainer one. Like, sure, they had, what was that? It was not Drop Stars or it was something Superstars, but no, Destruction All Stars. That's what it was. But that one I knew was not going to have much legs when my second match, you know, chicken or winner chicken dinner. Not that I'm that great of a battle royale player, but the controls were bad as far as side bumps and getting out of the car just felt weird. There was more that they could have done to that, but I think having your IP that you could have drawn from, or reskin it as with metal, you know, Twisted Metal, and have a little bit more car combat with weapons and things along those lines, I think that would have carried that for a good bit longer. But it just feels like they keep on making silly mistakes, like the whole Son of Sparta thing. That should have been a $20 game or in their PS Plus service.
Yep.
I think at the 40, was it 30 or 40 that they're charging for it? I think that
$30. It's $30.
Yeah, that pushes it into the realm where you're looking at things like Hades, or you're looking at things like Silk Song that are $10 less, and much better games, much more or visually, impressive, as well as many more levels and depth to the game. Like, I get it, you're a big company that backed this smaller project, but if it's a smaller project, charge a smaller price or make it part of the service as a draw and say, hey, this is just to wet your whistle until the trilogy comes out. And I think if it was $10 less, you wouldn't have as much feedback or backlash, let's just say. I mean, you'd still have the feedback, but that's also something that they probably, instead of making that game, and I know it's all about copy, what other hits are out there kind of thing when it comes to gaming, or the sincerest form of flattery type of deal. They would have been better off taking God of War, especially like what they did with Ragnarok, trying to make it like that, extend the DLC stuff that they did where it was like a roguelite. They would have been better off taking something like Hades, reskinning it as God of War to some extent, and playing that as a, hold you over until the trilogy is out. I think something along those lines would have landed better and could have garnered that $30 price at that point. But I don't know. I think a lot more closures are coming, not just with PlayStation, but other, areas as well. It include Xbox. Maybe Nintendo is about the best one to shield themselves because they keep on doing micro steps as far as stuff, and they make sure everything is either underpowered so that way it's more profitable and stuff. But all of that stuff aside, we have Marathon, weeks away. I mean, the beta's coming here soon for the open weekend or whatever, but all y'all that are PlayStation fans or Bungie fans, y'all better buy that game sight unseen, just so that way there's no more bad news cycle stories as far as PlayStation. Because if that game does not land, which I think it will have 3 to 4 weeks of reasonable participation, like your Destiny stands are going to eat this game up until they figure out, I just want to go back to Destiny, or I'll go back to Arc Raiders, or whatever other live service game that they were playing, or no lifing for the most part. After you get to that 3-month cycle, if they don't have constant content for updates and seasons and things, much like they did with the first Destiny that first year where it kind of fell flat until the Taken King, they're going to have a problem. And Bungie is not going to have a second chance. They're going to get absorbed. It's already been to the point where they've moved people on the board, and they're already divvying up some of the people that they've put to other studios. So there will be no more Bungie if this game does not land. And there will probably be no more Haven or Bend, or maybe 2 or 3 other studios that we're not even thinking of. And then they'll be left with Sony Santa Monica and Naughty Dog and maybe a handful of others. And that's what you'll have. And it'll be thanks to those 90 million consoles that maybe there's 3 or 4 in the household, but they're only buying 1 game per console, which, obviously makes sense because of game share, or, it's, one account on 3 different boxes in 3 different rooms kind of thing. But buy the game. Just start buying games, or otherwise you're going to see what you don't want to see, where, PlayStation games will be coming to Xbox without having to go through the Steam loophole or whatever. But that's to the Sony ponies out there that are, swearing up and down that everything's, just fine. It was, Bluepoint wasn't that big of a deal. 70 people there, it's no big deal. But considering how much IP that you guys have been asking for, whether it be a Bloodborne or other remakes, and they weren't put to use for that. And then you look at somebody like Bend Studios, who would have been better off at this point to do a, Days Gone 2, but were put on some sort of, games as a service project, which I think got canceled. And then they were kind of like, they had to repitch something else. That's like another 4 or 5 years before we could even see that. So where does that leave them? But I've rambled enough. I won't say it's fire sale completely just yet, but it is concerning. And, Marathon is going to be that either kindling, or maybe it'll be that anchor that, they can get around and build from there. But from what I'm seeing, I don't think it stands a chance. I knew that something along the lines of Arc Raiders would stand a chance, being the division stand that I am, and seeing that it was kind of like a sci-fi division. I don't see that same draw, even though, yes, it's Bungie. Yes, it has Destiny bones to it, and it has, these bright, like, highlighter colors and things like that. But it just doesn't have that same draw or interest for me as of yet. But I'll wait until I get hands on that free weekend and see if it goes from there. But I already have my doubts on it, but we'll revisit that in a week or two, and we'll see how well it does. And then 6 months from now, we'll see if it's continuing to do well. But just prepare for more bad news. I called it like a couple of years ago before the generation started that they would probably be acquired either by Apple or Amazon. Some of y'all better start praying for that, because that they're going to need that sugar daddy kind of pocketbook to kind of keep them. I wouldn't say keep them afloat, but to keep them productive in first party. And I know that all people would be like, you don't know what you're talking about. But when you cancel a lot of games and close this many studios, and you're not somebody like a Microsoft where your biggest portion of your business is this, you're losing billions of dollars. We can look at Concord as big of a issue that was a minimum based on the cost of the studio and the cost of investment in the game for development of 8 years, at least $500 million. But that's just one of the cancellations. Just think of how many other resources and dollars were involved in all the other cancellations. They're not Microsoft to be able to say, you know what, we lost 10 billion. We'll just lay off 1,200 here, close this studio, cancel this project, and we're good. No, it's not quite that easy for a smaller company. But hey, I got my shares and they split 10 ways, a few years back, so I'm good. Y'all can fight it out in the comments, but I've rambled enough. But time to get to the next topic.
No, you know what? Listen, this has been a great show. I didn't want to go, longer than 10 minutes because obviously I got a lot of stuff to do. But look, I want to say this. Everyone on this panel made mention of Marathon. Here's why I think Marathon has a really, really solid chance of failing. Let's just look at the playing field, right? Again, this is as shits and giggles as you can get, folks. Okay, let's look at the playing field. Right now, you have Arc Raiders that has stolen the zeitgeist of 2026, and it doesn't look like it's going to relent. Marvel Rivals continues to get updates. And of course, with everything going on with Marvel this year, with Doomsday and Spider-Man Brand New Day and the Punisher series and Daredevil Season 2. I mean, Marvel has a lot cooking, so people are going to be excited to play. It's a free-to-play game. But it's not just that. Look what just exploded better than it originally launched, and that's Overwatch. Well, it was called Overwatch 2. Now it's just Overwatch. And that is doing gangbuster numbers. They basically relaunched the franchise. But you still have out there Call of Duty and Apex Legends. And you name your favorite multiplayer game out there, folks. This is what they have to go against. And I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not piling on Bungie. And I'm certainly never going to say, oh, I hope that studio closes, because... No, listen, nobody wants to see any studio closures, and no one's piling on. But we got to call a spade here, folks. And I'm sorry to say, that last trailer looked freaking terrible. I'm sorry, it did. And if you think otherwise, okay, you know what? Not a problem. I'm not going to fight you on it. But let's not pretend that this is the game that has marred with controversy. And I don't think that they're going to be able to do enough to take players away from the games that they're playing right now and launch it at $40 for the regular edition and $60 for the deluxe. I don't think there's enough there. And you know what's crazy? I think Sony knows that there's not enough there. So we'll see what happens. But look, let me catch up on Super Chats, ladies and gentlemen. And then we're going to get everyone out of here so you can start your weekend. This has been a great show. I don't think anybody was overly facetious in any way. I think we all handled this like podcast professionals, and what we all spoke were the truth. Okay? Sony is in a pickle, whether you believe it or not, and console sales are just not going to do it, and they're not going to be able to make enough money. But, only time will tell to see what this decision does for future endeavors. And we'll see Marathon, what happens with that game in 2 weeks when it launches. Again, only time is going to tell. But we just catch up on Super Chats here. We have Chris R55 in the chat, drops a very generous $5 Super Chat and says, the Supreme Court struck down Trump's tariffs today. I don't trust these companies, but in a perfect world, this would lower the cost of hardware. I mean, we hate politics here, but I'm glad you did mention it, Chris. Listen, tariffs and raising costs of, memory and RAM are a problem. It's why consoles are ultimately going to be $1,000. And it's probably why these consoles that you currently have may be the consoles you're playing for the next 5 years. Unless, of course, Xbox does do what I think they're going to do and release OEM hardware as early as holiday of this year. And then, of course, you're going to see a multitude of, manufacturers. Like, I believe there is going to come a point where you're going to be able to buy an Xbox from Dell, from Alienware, from Lenovo, from Asus, and any of your other favorite electronic makers. I think that PC, this ideology of making this next box a PC first box is going to really change the space for gaming. And I really think that Sony pushed back the PlayStation 6 to reevaluate what was going on. Again, that's just my take, Chris. Mac22 in the chat says, factions and the multiplayer Spider-Man game, even if they half-assed it, those games would have sold #Sony foreheads. I mean, yeah. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. I know that, me and Crispy we're a bit sour on this. We love Twisted Metal, and I probably would have owned every car. Like, if it was a free-to-play game where I could get a vehicle that had The Last of Us slapped on it, or Crash Bandicoot or something on, I would have spent a lot of money in that game. Spider-Man. Now, look, I know that was discussed about Spider-Man. After a certain amount of swings, it would have been boring, but it could have worked if there was a story attached to it where it was a multiverse, which that's what it seemed like it was going to be. And you were traveling the multiverse, and you were fighting multiverse versions of Scorpion and Rhino, and they made events surrounding a hero or villain. You know what I'm saying? Like this month was dedicated to the Sinister Six or the symbiote saga. Look, I'm getting goosebumps because I'm a Marvel stan nerd, but I could have written this for them. And I guarantee you that I could have given you, just sitting here in this chair right now, 12 months of seasons with different heroes and different events. It could have been Secret Wars. It could have been Doomsday. You name it. Pick a freaking book and just go. Like, there's so many Marvel stories that could have been incorporated, especially with the webhead. But they didn't. They canceled it, and well, here we are. So thanks so much for that, Mac. We also have, lastly, It's Me, the Broke Boy, drops a very generous $10 super chat. So Will goes on to say, Marvel Tokon intrigues me. It's a Marvel. It's a Marvel, yes, but it's a fighting game niche market priced at $60 compared to Marvel Rivals, a hero shooter that's free. I don't have high hopes for it. Hope I'm wrong. Look, Marvel Tokon for me is one of my most anticipated games of the year. Yes, it's on PlayStation. Yes, it's on PC. I'm probably going to buy it on PlayStation. Could I buy it on PC and play it on my ROG? Yeah, but I don't know if I want to play a fighting game on my ROG Ally. Now, could I dock it? Sure, I could do all these things. That game has me excited. I'm wondering how long that stays an exclusive to those two platforms before it comes to Switch and an Xbox, because it's going to happen based on what we talked about today. Sony is going to be making some moves that are going to make the pony community very uncomfortable, and they're not going to like it. And that's, well, as the great and famous Richard Pryor said, tough titties. So take that for what it's worth. But Corkenstein, let's sell the brand, brother. What you got going on, man? We gotta see when you're gonna do this big relaunch. What you got going on with the community? Are there any giveaways? And more importantly, if people want to follow you, get the 411, or at least you find potentially strike up a conversation with you, where can they go, man? Oh, you're muted, brother.
Sorry, I hit the wrong button on the. Usually, I have it on my mixer, but
That's okay, dude.
yeah. Hey guys, big thank you to everyone in the community for the great chats, all of that stuff. Always good to be talking with Crispy, Silent, Fuzzy, and of course you, Boom. Best community here. Yeah, big thanks for having me on again. I wanted to say, yeah, you can find me at the Corkenstein at on Twitter, X, Blue Sky, all that stuff. We do actually have a really cool AMA coming up with 11-Bit Studios and their game that's released, Death Howl. It's that card game that's on, I think it's on Game Pass. I got to take a look, but
I'm pretty sure it is, yeah.
Yeah, they're doing an AMA with us, and they'll be giving away codes of the game.
Nice.
That happens on Tuesday, the 24th, I believe, at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. But yeah, head over to the Xbox subreddit. And yeah, all the details will be there. I'll be making a post shortly after this. And then, yeah, for the stuff with everything, like I said, just with the last 3 weeks, like I said, the car accident and everything, just been kind of busy. So I'll be hopefully working on that this weekend.
Nice.
And then maybe working on some videos, trying to plan some stuff out. But as always, thank you guys. Always love being on the show.
Appreciate you being here, brother. Crispy Bomb, sell the brand, brother. Where can people follow you on the socials to get that crispy truth and a side of receipts?
At Chris Baum on X, Chris Baum 28 Xbox Live, and yes, I'm the receipt keeper in chief. But I'll see you guys not next week, but the week after. I have a strange week of work, so we'll see you on the next show on Boom's channel.
Nice, brother. Well, we'll be looking forward to that, and I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about because by then Marathon will have launched, and well, we'll see if the PlayStation community that talks a lot of ish will actually come out and support this game. We will certainly see. I think that it releasing at not being a free-to-play game is a big mistake, but I don't sign the checks for Bungie, and I don't work for PlayStation. But that's fine. We'll find out. Silent Cypher, still the brand, brother. What you got going on? Where can people find you on the socials? And thanks again for joining us, man. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. As always great to hang out with you guys in the morning. Hopefully I'll be seeing most of you gentlemen here in a couple months, actually in real life. So that'd be kind of cool.
Yes, sir. That's right. June, here we come.
Yeah, buddy. But yeah, as far as where you can find me in the meantime, find me Silent Cypher on pretty much everything. Find me on Twitter being an ass goblin again. Sorry, Boom. My apologies. But yeah, you find me there. You'll probably find me quite a bit this weekend playing Arc Raiders on Xbox. So feel free to hit me up there, add me. If we can get into Speranza and go loot some stuff, I'm all for it. Hit me up. I always enjoy playing a match. Maybe FarQ will be out there with us as well. But yeah, besides that, chat, you guys were awesome today. Keep an eye on things this evening. Make sure to tune in and watch us on Fright Nights with Ferocious Fee as we talk about Disturbia this evening, starring Shia LaBeouf. Should be a fun one.
Just got locked up, that dude.
Yeah, I know.
I know. Can't stay out of trouble. He got locked up in New Orleans, man. God damn it! You want to root for that guy, and every time you try to root for him, he punches somebody in the nose. I don't understand it. What's the deal with that guy?
It's sad too, because like he's had a good career when it comes to films and stuff, and it just feels like he's got a troubled mind, and he has a hard time not punching people. So fingers crossed everything works out. But at least you'll get to see the innocent version, or the more innocent version of him in Disturbia if you watch that movie and tune in this evening.
Nice. Well, we'll be looking forward to that. And speaking of Fright Night with Ferocious Fee, one of the leads of that show with his wife is Fuzzy Belvedere. Brother, sell the brand. Where can people tune in this evening? 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And more importantly, subscribe to the channel, but follow you guys on social media.
Oh, as always, love doing this with you guys on Friday. Love talking about the industry and everything that we got to look forward to between now and June and the rest of the year. And Game Pass is hurting that backlog. It's making the struggle harder. But everybody be safe out there. Have a great weekend. Come join us for Fright Night with Ferocious Fee. Like Silent Cypher said, 6 p.m. tonight. We'll be talking about Disturbia. And yes, Shy. Actually, he didn't do the punching. He got kind of beat up. But hopefully he'll go back to New Orleans and enjoy Mardi Gras, for what it's meant to be, instead of punches, throwing beads at the ladies. But we'll see how that goes. But yeah, Disturbia is the movie of tonight. I put the link in the chat for the channel. Please check us out. Come hang out with us. Awesome time as always. We get a little bit sidetracked, and I think I was above the jokes a lot last week, but all in good fun. So it's a great time to come hang out with us. So hope to see you guys there, and then look forward to seeing you guys right here on this channel come Monday for Xbox Lunch Break Special. So get that gaming time in while you can.
All right, guys, thank you so much for being here. I'm gonna close out the show with something that my Theo always says: treat others how you want to be treated, and it doesn't cost anything to be nice. You live by those rules, I can guarantee you're going to have an awesome day. So take care, everyone, and we'll see you next Friday on the newest episode of Breakfast with Boom.